Okay, well, I'd like to welcome everyone to the Monadnock Sustainability Hub's second virtual Drive-E Expo. We're going to have a panel today with a variety of local EV owners to answer your questions and hopefully inform and inspire you on the beauty and the joys of electric vehicles. In the way of introduction, for those of you who aren't familiar, the Monadnock Sustainability Hub strengthens the sustainability of and the resilience of our region by working collaboratively to reach 100% clean energy. In honor of Earth Day this year, we're combining our initiatives in transportation, which I'll reference just briefly later, and remind everyone that transportation accounts for about 28% of our greenhouse gases. So it's an important opportunity for us. So we're going to talk about electrifying transportation today. We've got some great local panelists, some folks who've had a lot of experience with EVs. Myself, I drive a Chevy Bolt, have for 2.5 years. Dave Birchenough has a Tesla 3. Peter Hansel also has a Chevy Bolt. Bruce Norland has a Tesla Model S. Bruce Tucker has a Model X Tesla. And then Sarah Weck has a Volkswagen e-Golf. I'd just like to give a quick shout out to our expo. Presumably you know about that, but it's on our website, greenmonadnock.org. And essentially it's an opportunity to look at, again, some of the same sorts of things that we're going to talk about here. And also lots of background information. There's a lot of resources there and information on electric vehicles for anyone who's interested in learning more. So with that, I'm going to introduce the panel. We'll start alphabetically. I'm going to ask each of the folks in the panel to briefly introduce themselves, their car, maybe the town they're from, and why they initially considered getting their EV, and then open the chat up, and hopefully we'll have some more questions, but otherwise we're just going to have a fun discussion of EVs. So Dave.
Thank you, John. My name is Dave Birchenough. I reside in Nelson, New Hampshire, and I was first introduced to electric cars way back in 2017, I believe it was, when I had the opportunity to participate in a Tesla road trip, as they called it. It wasn't even around here. It was near where my brother lived in the Adirondacks of New York State. And we had a chance to drive a Tesla Model X at the time. And I was blown away at the capability of an electric vehicle and learning about them. I knew right away that this was something that I wanted to get. Needless to say, I couldn't afford a Model X. I couldn't afford one today, but the Model 3 became announced shortly thereafter, and I put my name on the reservation list and waited a long 2 years before I was able to get my Model 3 in May of 2019. So I've had it for just about 2 years now, and I every single day I look forward to driving that car. I absolutely love it. I love the fact that I can plug it in every night, and in the morning it's got about 325 miles of range possible if I'm going to take a trip, and I wouldn't ever want to drive a combustion engine car again at this point in time.
Thank you, Dave. Peter?
Okay, hi, I'm Peter Hansel. I live in Keene, and my transition to an electric vehicle goes back a little farther than Dave's. I started getting away from internal combustion engine back in 2001. Coincidentally, it was on September 11th, 2001, when in the midst of everything that was going on in New York, our minivan died in the parking lot of right here at the Colony Mill, and that was sort of a time for me to re-examine, myself and my values, and everyone was, wondering what was going on in the world. And I took that opportunity to say, I'm not buying another internal combustion engine. I had to make a transition, however. I went to Toyota and got a Prius back in 2001, one of the first ones that I think was being driven in the area. And ended up driving Priuses until Chevy came out with a hybrid in, I think, 2009 or 10, somewhere in there. And I wanted a domestically made car, so I went from a Toyota to a Chevy, and still a hybrid though. This is all hybrid. Gradually, the Volt was a plug-in hybrid, so that was a little bit of a step up for me. And then following, others like John Condos and actually my daughter, who transitioned to an EV before I did, I said, well, it's time to take the step. So this past February, I went back to Chevy and said, I've been leasing all this time, by the way. I'd like to transition to a Bolt, and they made a good deal for me on a lease for a Bolt, and that's where I ended up with that.
All right. So Bruce Norland.
There. My name is Bruce Norland. I know it's not in the description at the bottom, but I have a Tesla Model S that I bought 3.5 years ago. And actually, it was the second car that is somewhat involved with electricity, because my other car is a Toyota Camry hybrid, 2009, that I still have. I took a test ride in a number of cars that Teslas that other people had, and have been doing the research on the cars for about a year before my girlfriend and I actually took a ride in one in Dedham, Massachusetts. And at that point, it was full steam ahead. And we ordered one shortly thereafter. And we got exactly what we wanted for options. And it was delivered to our house about 2 months later. And the best thing I think about it is that it's got very fast acceleration. And it holds the road very well, because the battery, which is quite heavy, is down low under the floor of the car. But it also was nice knowing that it helps with the environment because of the pollution. And we figured this car is going to last us for the rest of our lives. I'm 78, so I'm sure it's going to be good, for that length of time, because there's so many fewer parts that wear out. So
Great.
there.
Thank you, Bruce. Bruce Tucker.
Forgot that I muted. My name is Bruce Tucker, and I currently live in Peterborough, New Hampshire. For a number of years before that, I lived in California, which is where most of my EV driving has been. And before that, I was in Phoenix in the early 90s, and that's where I really started to get interested in electric vehicles. I joined the Electric Auto Association in Phoenix, and my first real exposure to the EVs were there, and with the Phoenix Space Speedway, where they had the APS Solar and Electric 500s, where I saw some of the early EVs, including the GM Impact, which ultimately became the EV1. When I moved to LA, it was a little bit easier to experience EVs, because I couldn't ever have gotten an EV1 because I wouldn't qualify. You had to fill out an application to GM to buy one, and I didn't qualify. So in the early 2000s, they started having ZEV mandate hearings at the California Air Resources Board, where they kind of changed the rules, and all the early set of EVs, like the Honda Plus, the EV1 from GM, Toyota RAV4s, all just stopped production because they didn't need to make them in order to satisfy the EV mandate. So our first EV was a home conversion that we bought from a high schooler in Florida and had it shipped out to us. So that was a converted BMW, and it had a minimal range, you might say, but it was enough to get my wife to work and back each day. And we had that until 2005, when we bought a Toyota RAV4 EV off of eBay, coming off a 3-year lease. This was a 2002. And that was her daily driver until 2018, when we finally got our Model 3 for her. It was beginning to show the turtle a little bit. It didn't like the voltage sags that happens when your batteries are getting aged, but it was already, what was it, 16 years old at that point. So it was a functional EV running on nickel metal hydride batteries for 16 years. So I, meanwhile, had parked the Honda Accord in the side of the driveway and said that if we don't ever drive this in the next year, it's time to get rid of it. It was in 1991. And so that went away because I had purchased my Model X. So last June, we drove our Model X and Model 3 from Los Angeles area out here to New Hampshire. And experienced what it's like to travel long distance in an EV. And I can talk about that later if people like. Currently, I'm in New Mexico, where we drove those two Teslas back across the country while the house is being remodeled. And so I have a second experience with traveling in a Tesla long distance. Anyway, that's my experience with EVs.
Hey, lots of stuff there to inquire about further. Sarah, would you like to share, those little bit of intro background with us?
Oh yeah, sure. I wasn't going to talk about my Prius, but since that got mentioned earlier, I should say that I started with a Prius, the hybrid, in 2002, and saved so much money on gasoline that I was hooked on that. That was in California, so you have to keep in mind gasoline is more expensive out there. So it was a great car, and I still have it. It's still running. It has almost 200,000 miles on it. So that's, and then I bought another Prius in 2017 that gets even better mileage because those cars keep getting better and better. And then it was just time to get an all electric. And my husband loved VW. He thought they were a great car, very well engineered, very well designed. So we found a VW e-Golf in New York, in Schenectady. We live in New Hampshire, in West Chesterfield. We went over to get the car, drove it all the way back on a full charge, we made it back here. But keep in mind that the e-Golf does not have the range of a Tesla, and it is less expensive. So for people who are looking for a less expensive alternative to a Tesla, this was a good car. I don't know that they're going to keep making the e-Golf. I think Volkswagen is going to be making other all-electric cars. I'm not sure if they're going to make the e-Golf, but I love it. And the reason I got it was because, first and foremost, I wanted to reduce my carbon footprint. That was the first thing. It's extremely important that we all do that. And I've contributed enough carbon to the atmosphere already. I don't need to keep doing it. So I love this car. I drive it close to every day. I have to get my mail from the post office. They don't deliver. So I hop in the car, go get it, come back, go to the store, come back, just trips like that. It has about 140 miles of range. So daily driving, it's perfect. Other people have mentioned the handling of an electric vehicle, amazing handling. Everyone in the family, my daughter, my husband, and I, we fight over who is going to get to drive the electric vehicle. And it just drives better. It drives better. You have what some people referred to earlier. It's instant torque in the car, so you can really pick up quickly, pick up speed. People are always surprised by that. I think big vehicles that see me whizzing past them are kind of scratching their heads. How did I do that? It's not an obvious electric car like the Tesla. So I can answer any questions for those who want to jump into the electric vehicle market and not spend the same amount of money that you would spend on a Tesla. There are charging stations. Keep in mind, you don't have to worry about that.
Yep.
So
we'll get to some questions, Sarah. Thank you. So one of the first questions that I think keep coming up is, Yeah, how is driving an electric vehicle compared to an internal combustion engine vehicle? And maybe, we can just go around, or if somebody wants to jump in, just raise your hand. And you don't have to answer every question, but, I'd love to hear a few people make that comparison for folks.
Better.
Yeah, I would agree.
It's faster, it's quieter. It's actually safer. It had one of the highest safety ratings. But those are the main reasons.
One of the things that attracted me to electric and hybrid first, and then electric, was the ease of handling, and to know that everybody zipping by you or whatever, it doesn't really matter. They're spending a lot of money on gas. I'm just more relaxed. I knew that when I first got my Prius. I just drive more relaxed. Now that I have an all-electric car, it's even more so. I enjoy putting it into the low gear so I can regenerate some power when I'm braking. It's a very exciting drive.
I often tell people that I'm giving a test drive to, a warning, half joking, half not, is that don't test drive this car, because once you do, you're going to want to buy it. And it's really true.
Yeah, I can vouch for that. That's exactly what happened. There was no question.
That's good. Yeah, let me ask that question, because I say this to people all the time, but has anyone met anyone that's an EV owner that would go back to an internal combustion engine? Because I've heard of studies that say it's over 90%, and yet I've never found even that 1%. You ever talked to an EV owner that wants to go back?
No,
So I think they
never.
need to redo that market research. There must have been some unhappy Tesla owners out in California or somewhere in the early days or maybe the early Leaf owners, because I don't know where you get to even 10%. Another question that came up was, what surprised you about driving or owning an EV?
I can mention something there. The comfort level is so much greater than in an ICE car. And when I say that, not only is it quiet and smooth and acceleration is beyond expectations, but when I take a longer drive, I am very, very relaxed at the end of that drive. And I must admit that part of that is due to the fact that the Teslas and many other electric vehicles have improved self-driving capabilities, so that although you still need to be attentive and still have to have a hand on the wheel, I put it into autopilot probably 95% of the time. And so when I'm driving, I can look around and see the scenery and talk to people in the car. And by the time I've driven 3 or 4 hours, it feels like I've driven 15 minutes. I am very relaxed after a long trip, and I love that about the car.
I want to add to that, because I agree. I'm also really relaxed in my electric car. And for me, I think part of it is that it's just so quiet. Noise,
Yes.
even if we don't realize it, a lot of that noise of something burning, exploding, basically, constant mini explosions, that is stressful. It's stressful. We may not realize it, but the quiet, the silence of these electric vehicles is more relaxing.
It's great for listening to the music, a lot easier too.
I've found when you're driving and you come up behind a bicycle, they don't hear you. You have to pass a lot further away or make some kind of noise. Otherwise, they can start veering in front of you. And the other thing I found too is that the accident avoidance is excellent. A few days ago, I had a couple of deer almost hit my car, and the car stopped automatically.
Wow.
So yeah, I never even saw the deer until after the car stopped.
Excellent. Yeah.
As someone who has driven across with long days, I totally agree about the quiet being an important aspect of it. when you are in the car for 12 hours in that day and you don't feel tired at the end of it, it's, due to the stops you make along the supercharge, and the quiet and the autopilot too, for sure. But
I've used autopilot and I find it's really great if you're on a highway and there's not too much traffic. I get a little nervous when there's a lot of traffic, but I find even with a curvy road, you just sit there with your hand on the wheel and it actually centers in the lane between the lines. But it was scary at first. You have to think, oh yeah, the car is doing fine. It's taking care of you.
So another question popped up. How long does the rechargeable battery itself last? In the life of the car, and what about the recycling the battery? Those were like three different questions, and I'd be happy to take part of that. But if anybody wants to at least give some information, Bruce Tucker, you've had some longevity with it, experience, and maybe anyone else.
right. Well, the RAV4 that I spoke about had a different chemistry. It was a nickel metal hydride. But the recent studies out of Tesla has shown that the batteries are lasting longer than they initially expected or predicted, and those were still quite long life expectancies. So I'm not worried about replacing my batteries at any time soon. I think the only reason that you might eventually want to replace them is if they've increased the capacity of the battery within the space, and you could upgrade to a higher capacity battery. But I don't expect to see a need for a new battery for that decade or more.
Does anybody know if the Prius, the hybrid, the battery in a Prius is the same kind of battery as
No,
what?
it's a nickel metal hydride, and we eventually had to replace ours in our 2004 Prius. My daughter now drives that.
Yeah, for some reason, we still drive our 2002 Prius and it has almost 200,000 miles on it. We've never had to replace the battery. Yeah, it still runs.
They're good batteries.
Yeah.
I can comment too on the Tesla. The battery is guaranteed to have at least 70% of its range after 8 years or 100,000 miles, which I think is impressive.
I think there was a question about recycling or what to do with the battery. And I don't know that's not something I know about, but I wonder if they recycle.
I can comment on that if you want me to.
Yeah.
It's interesting because as many folks in the EV world know, some of the early Leafs had some battery problems. Their batteries were notorious for not lasting very long and they lost their charges. But now there's actually a pretty robust used, especially Leaf batteries, but some others as well, battery market, and people are using them in residential PV storage. So, for example, my PV system is over a decade old, and I have adjusted glass mat batteries, which was, sort of the state of the art for, residential PV system battery storage back then, a decade ago. But when I replace those, it's pretty obvious that I'd be going to a lithium ion or some other variation of lithium batteries. So it's, the battery world is changing pretty dramatically, but the older batteries from some of the Leafs and some other cars that have, for whatever reason, expired, the batteries are being recycled and reused on stationary applications. But I am still very intrigued with the potential for battery recycling, but it's still in its infancy. There's also a lot of talk about PV recycling, which both of those are very interesting topics, but I don't think we want to go off on a tangent.
I have a Toyota Camry hybrid, and it's a 2009 that I bought in March of 2008, but I've had no problems with the battery at all. And it's a nickel metal hydride battery.
Right. And battery technology is immensely hard to keep up with. In my mind, it seems like the technologies keep moving and there's new developments and lots of interest in solid state batteries now. So there's a lot of dynamics there, but basically, the batteries seem to be exceeding the expectation. So maybe move on to another question, and we can come back to batteries if people want to talk some more about it. But one of the things that people often hear about is range anxiety. And so I wondered if anyone wanted to comment on that. And, I know one way to ask that is how long before you got over your range anxiety, but, maybe you just I'd be interested in everyone's take on that whole issue, because we all know the batteries come with a, mileage rating anywhere from, maybe Sarah's 150 miles to the Bolts, where if you're around 320, although I'm getting much higher than that now. Interestingly, after 2.5 years, the battery range seems to have increased. And then for the Tesla owners, maybe you all want to comment on, range anxiety.
John, I can tell you that my Model 3 has a maximum range of 325. And the beauty of the Tesla, and I'm sure others as well, is when you put in your GPS in your car, you put in your destination, the Tesla will tell you whether you can make it to your destination or not on the range that you have available at that specific time. In other words, based on your state of charge. If you can't make it to your destination, it will tell you where you can stop to plug into a Tesla supercharger in order to make it as far as you want to go. So it's built in. The anxiety isn't there, because before you even get out of the garage, you know exactly where you're going to recharge it in order to make it to your destination.
You're going to Maine, right?
Peter?
Yeah, I can comment on that as well. We've driven down to Sarasota, Florida with our Tesla, and you just plan where to stop along the way, and it was no problem at all.
My car has the shortest range, I think, of the car represented here. And, oh, am I on mute?
No, you're okay.
Okay. So range anxiety could be an issue for a car with only like 140, 150 miles of range. The key is just don't take it on a long trip if you can't, we have another car, we have a Prius, so we can take that. But in terms of my daily use, no problem at all. It depends what you're using the car for. But if you need a car just to get around town or even commute to work, I mean, this car works fine, and we've never run out of charge, and we use it more than the other cars.
John, let me, sorry about that. My phone just went up. We bought our car in the middle of the winter and used it mostly around town. I think the range anxiety is more on my spouse than on myself, because we decided finally to take a long trip down to visit some relatives down in Philadelphia, and this was going to be a test. So we did a few test charges at various places around New Hampshire to try to make sure it worked properly, to get the anxiety level down a little bit. But once we took off and went down to towards Philadelphia, we knew we were going to have to stop one place. We stopped in Stamford, Connecticut, at a fast charging station there. Spent about an hour charging our Bolt. This is a Bolt that I have, and continued down to Philadelphia. Found another charging station down there, topped it off to get ready for the trip back, and then duplicated the system on the way back. So again, the anxiety is not so much my anxiety, it's more my spouse's anxiety, which you always have to take into account. And I didn't tell her as we were coming back after recharging in Stanford and figuring, well, we made it down here fine. We should be able to get back to Keene fine on that same amount of charge. It's a little uphill coming back to Keene, and you don't realize that until you drive an electric car. I made it back into Keene with 15 miles left on my range. So it was a little nerve-wracking at the end there.
Yeah, I know that feeling. I've been there and done that. It's always uphill to the home stretch.
Yeah, I'd like to share my most intense range anxiety experience with you. I was returning from dropping my daughter off at college a few years ago, and I was passing through central western Kansas heading down towards Oklahoma. And I realized that I didn't have enough fuel to get there. So I reduced my speed. Then I turned off my air conditioning and I just barely limped into the gas station because I was driving my Prius. So range anxiety is not simply in EV. It's anytime you go beyond where you normally are. And I want to point out that in 20 years, it's likely that range anxiety will be greater for internal combustion engine cars, because as more and more people get electric cars, there will be fewer and fewer gas stations. There won't be one on every corner anymore. You might find yourself running out of gas more frequently than an electric car runs out of charge.
That's right. Yeah, I know. It's funny. People
I just
forget
wanna
about it.
add
People
one
run out of
thing.
gas altogether so often. I always get a kick out of seeing somebody putting gas in the car on the side of the road, but it happens. Peter?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, Bruce mentioned the AC, air conditioning. I didn't mention that on my way down to Philadelphia, because it was a new experience for myself, I never turned on the heat. So my wife was freezing the whole time we were going down south. I've learned since then, turn on the heat.
Yeah, unfortunately, the heat does. That's probably one of the. There was a question about the advantages and disadvantages, and that's probably one of the big disadvantages of EVs is they don't have all that waste heat that they can use in the winter to keep your cabin warm. I noticed that the mileage. I mean, when I turn my heater on, immediately my range drops dramatically, and yeah, it seems to be. It's all being calculated, obviously, but there's an opportunity in the wintertime, at least, to extend your range dramatically in an EV by getting by with the heated seats and the heated steering wheel and not the heat from the car. And yet the other thing that I find intriguing, and a buddy of mine with a Kia Niro has a heat pump, which is a more efficient way to heat the car. I'm not sure whether the Teslas have heat pumps, but that would mean your diminished range from heating would be reduced, I would assume, with a heat pump rather than a more conventional heater that I think I have in the boat.
John,
Yeah,
the
the newer
Model Y
ones.
came out with a heat pump, and the Model 3 is now comes with a heat pump as well.
Right.
The newer ones
Right.
then did.
Yeah.
Bruce?
Yeah, that's true. I found too that I plug in at home and you can preheat the car, while you're inside, you use your smartphone and you just preheat it and then you go. The other thing too is that all of the seats are heated, and you can have 3 different levels of preheat. And the steering wheel is heated as well.
Right.
So, yeah. And
I do love preheating the car without having to open the garage door. That's a real treat with it being plugged in, obviously. That's kind of a fun thing.
yes, it is.
Any other comments on that? Because I have a new question I'll ask, but I don't want to cut anyone off.
The only other one thing I want to say is that we have a range of 259 miles with our car, and it's dropped down to 250 miles over 3.5 years. So that's not a very big penalty as far as degradation of a battery.
No, not at all. The question is about winter driving, and I'd ask maybe each of us, because we probably have all had plenty of experience with it, but some comments and perhaps comparing it to maybe other vehicles you've owned, so people have a perspective on it. But basically, for winter driving.
John, let me say something about that, because when I bought my Model 3 2 years ago, I was able to buy the rear wheel only style of vehicle. They're not available anymore in the Tesla line. It's all all-wheel drive. But I was concerned about the effect of winter driving. I watched a number of YouTube videos to realize that in any Tesla, because it's so computer controlled, that you cannot spin those tires. You cannot go into a spin in a Tesla, even on a slippery snow-covered road. And it's true. I can go down a snow-covered road, dirt road in the wintertime around a corner, and I can floor that car. I can put the pedal down to the floor. And yes, you can feel the car beginning to spin the tire for a few milliseconds. And then you just simply go around the corner by steering it. It will not spin out on you. because it is so computer controlled. It's a wonderful experience. It's on a rear wheel drive car. It's the best car in the winter I've ever owned.
That says a lot. Anyone else? Before I jump in?
Yeah, I have an all-wheel drive version, and I have to agree, I have a steep driveway, and I've never had the wheels spin on it. You know, I'm probably cautious, but still, you know, it's only me. It's not the car. The car will do what it needs to do, and the computer control is awesome.
Yeah.
I know from my experience, I mean, I had a Prius prior to the Bolt, and I've always put studded snows on for the winter, mostly because I think icing has become an increased problem, and I really enjoy the added traction of those studs, even though they're noisy as heck. But I find it to be really extraordinary in handling. And again, I like you, Bruce, I have a steep driveway I have to turn and then go up. And I've had absolutely no problems with it in either snow or ice. And I've experienced both this past couple of winters. So, I find it to be, quite good in terms of just the basic getting in and out of the driveway and the hard stuff. But then on the road, I don't think the Bolt has as significant, as sophisticated wheel spin as the Tesla, because I find that I can spin the tires inadvertently if I accelerate. And so I think it can spin the tires, but at the same time, I think its road handling is extraordinary. I really enjoy the traction and the grip that I feel I have. And it's that low centered weight, distributed weight of the batteries that it probably does that.
And just to chime in, because I don't have a Tesla or a Bolt. My car doesn't do well. It's not an all-wheel drive. So we don't drive it, on heavy snow and icy roads. We just don't drive it. But keep in mind that brand new with incentives, it only costs $20,000. Brand new car that, with zero maintenance. So if you're looking for a cheaper option.
And that's a good segue to the next question, unless anyone wants to make another comment about winter driving. And that is about the cost savings. So one of the questions is, what are some of the biggest cost savers compared to internal combustion cars?
Zero maintenance. I mean, I don't even know what I'm supposed to do to this car because I haven't taken it in since I bought it, 18 months old. There must be something I need to do, but maybe someone else can let me know, someone on the panel.
The cabin air filter.
As far as maintenance is concerned, let me see, windshield washer fluid, windshield wiper blades, and tires. That's basically it.
Eventually, I guess, brake. Or do brakes, you don't use them.
You don't use them very often. The regenerative braking is a big help. So you can actually do one pedal driving.
Amazing.
So yeah, your standard brakes are not getting used very often, so they last much longer because the regenerative are doing the majority of the braking work for you, if you will, which is a great thing about even brakes. But I mean, I live on a dirt road. I've had over 2.5 years in my Bolt, and the only thing I've done is a cabin air filter, which I would have had to do in any vehicle I own because I live on a dirt road, and there's a certain amount of that. So that's the only thing. And I do recommend, you live on a dirt road too, sir, so you might want to get your cabin air filter too. But that's it. That's the beauty of it.
I mean, you got it. You can't beat the cost. I happen to have solar panels, so I try to charge my car during the day. I mean, I work from home. So when I go out for errands, I come back, plug it in during the day, it charges up. It's free. I mean, you have to buy the solar panels, but basically the energy is free. So no maintenance, no energy cost. I mean, you can't beat that. There's no car on the road other than the all electric where you can find that. So it's cheaper.
Yes, we like to call that driving on sunshine.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, actually, funny story. I had to do a load of laundry, so I unplugged the car because I just came back from Maine, so I needed to keep it charged. It was still charging, and I just said, "Well, I'll get the laundry done, then I'll plug the car back in. The sun will be take care of my charge instead of trying to do it off the utility. So I do try to charge off my PV whenever I can, but sometimes I do let it go at night.
Some people were talking about using the Tesla as a battery storage for when there are blackouts. This has been true in California with the PG&E turning off the electricity. The Tesla owners will store their energy on their Tesla battery. I don't understand it exactly. And then somehow they'll use the battery from their Tesla to power things in their home. So, you know, you can be creative with it.
I don't think
Quick-
Tesla has that yet.
No, they don't.
I
No.
think some of the other cars do.
Yeah, it's called V2G, or vehicle to grid capability. And the electronics to do that are not in a Tesla at the moment, but they will be. I'll guarantee it.
Well-
Once the grid companies can figure out how to manage that, Tesla will make that available.
Tesla can make it available now, but the problem, Dave, is they'd rather sell you a Tesla Powerwall. So they're holding it back. But V2G is in a very exciting area. And V2V is the other one we haven't talked about, and I'll just mention it quickly. Right now, most electric vehicles, when they run out of juice on the road, i.e., run out of gas, they have to be put on a tow truck and towed. But V2V is emerging in some vehicles already, where another electric vehicle could pull up to your electric vehicle that's sitting on the side of the road, ran out of juice, and give you a jump, and that would effectively then allow you to then get to a charger, and that's emerging as well. But vehicle to grid is a very interesting subject, and it's most likely, Sarah, to come from non-Tesla cars that don't have competing technology within their basket of portfolio of products. At least that's the scuttlebutt on the EV websites.
Mhm.
Peter?
Yeah, John, you're bringing up a topic that I think is worth mentioning. I don't know whether you were going to get into this later on or not, but I wanted to bring it up anyway. All of us have to realize, unless we're totally reliant on solar panels on our roof, that the energy that we're getting to charge our cars, whether it's in our driveway or at a charging station, is coming from the grid. And the grid isn't all renewable energy at this point. Only if you're a typical Eversource user in New Hampshire, only about 23% of that is renewable energy. The rest of it is from conventional energy sources. It feels good to drive an electric vehicle because you're not spewing out, greenhouse gases into the area that you're driving. But you do have to remember that a lot of that is coming from a non-renewable source, which means that most of us should be trying hard to get our communities and our state and our federal government to transition away from greenhouse gas or fossil fuel generated electricity. In Keene, for instance, I happen to be on a committee that's trying to do that right now. We're going to try to transition our energy source from what it is now to 100% renewable by 2030. As more people start to convert their driving to electricity, convert their heating and air conditioning to electricity, that's going to put more demand on the grid system, and which means it's even more important for us to keep pushing for getting the grid converted to 100% renewable energy as quickly as we can. I think we're seeing motions that way. The federal government is starting to talk this way now, which is surprising. I mean, it's amazing, but we need to keep the pressure on.
I agree. I just want to say I agree entirely with that.
Yes, it's important to make the argument that even though it's not completely renewable energy, it's an EV has the capability of becoming cleaner with time as we clean up the grid. And that
Right.
can't be said about any ICE car. They will always be spewing out carbon dioxide and other pollutants, but but EVs can get cleaner with time.
And would we, is there a study on the amount of fossil fuels needed to create the electricity to charge a car to go a certain number of miles? I think you're still using less, right? It's still more efficient to drive electric, even if your power generation is from fossil fuels.
Yes.
First of all, an electric vehicle is 3 times more efficient in moving the vehicle down the road than an ICE vehicle. 3
Yes.
times more efficient. So putting whatever energy source you put in, your electricity would have to be filthy to equal the pollution of an ICE vehicle, first of all. So the second part of that question, though, is really by state almost. And New Hampshire is relatively clean. Yes, we still have Bow, but we also have the nuke, and we rely on a lot of hydro. And so it really just depends on the state you're charging your car in as far as what your, how clean or dirty your electricity is. But by and large, the U.S. electrical system has gotten significantly cleaner. Coal has dropped from, I believe it was up in the neighborhood of 40% a little over a decade ago to less than 20% today. So that's the national situation. And, I think it's true elsewhere. But certainly, if you look at, you can easily look at the electricity grid and the sources of electricity. And New Hampshire's has gotten quite a bit cleaner over the last several years. And if we could see Bow closed, it would just take another big step forward. But in general, there's no comparison in addition to what Bruce and others have said. There was a question, maybe just to make sure we do this. Someone's asked about charging. Could we speak in a little more detail about charging on the road and at home, including time and costs? It's good. One or two, you take a shot at that one.
Well, I can tell you about time. As far as time is concerned, I just plug in overnight and it's never an issue if I'm charging at home. I can charge it. It's 17 miles an hour the way mine is set up. So I can get 170 miles overnight.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Yeah, this is an important issue. Again, with my hat as on the Energy Committee. First of all, in Keene anyway, you probably should get a level 2 charger for your house so that you can charge twice as fast. That means you're using 230 volts instead of 115, and it'll charge at least twice as fast as you would otherwise. But you do need to probably get a permit for that from the city. I'm in the process of trying to do that at my house. I've always just relied on plugging into my 115 volt outlet, which is going to take a long time to recharge a 150 mile journey after I return from Philadelphia, for instance. So you do have to keep that in mind, but you should try to upgrade your outlet to at least a 230 volt.
Yeah, that's what I have. I have it's a Tesla wall charger, and it's 230, 240 volt.
Right. And really, it's the same as an electric dryer. So it's really a pretty common, thing in many houses to have a 240 volt circuit to handle that. So it's not an overbearing problem. Dave?
John, with a Tesla, if you're going to plug into 110, and one of my neighbors has done that until he was able to upgrade to a 230 volt circuit, you get about 3 miles per hour on a 110 volt plug-in. I too have a 240 volt Tesla charger in my garage from the beginning, and it's not quite as easy as just putting in another circuit. You kind of have to do some calculating based on what your panel is rated for, what kind of copper you have. My garage is detached, so I have an underground conduit through which my cable has to run. So my capability in my situation is I charge at a rate of 40 miles per hour in the Tesla with a level 2 charger. On the road, most of the new Tesla superchargers are now what they call version 3, the 250 kilowatt chargers as opposed to 150 kilowatt chargers on the version 2. And on a version 3, depending on the state of charge when you plug in, you can get range, or you can get charging speeds up to 1,000 miles per hour. So let's say you're driving and you stop in at a supercharger and you need about 250 miles of additional charge to get to where you want to go. That's going to take you 15 minutes in a good situation. If your batteries are extremely low or extremely high state of charge, it's going to take you a little bit longer than that. But that's a good rule of thumb. 15 minutes per 250 miles is really quite astounding nowadays.
I will say the state of infrastructure for charging in the state of New Hampshire is abysmal,
It's
and
not
needs to be improved. There are, a couple Tesla superchargers. There's one in Brattleboro, which technically isn't New Hampshire, and there's DC fast charging coming in, hopefully to the Monadnock co-op soon. And that's one thing that we need to do in general is get our legislature and New Hampshire PUC to start insisting on policies and rate schedules that encourage people to install chargers and drive electric. That's the biggest focus that I have right now.
I couldn't agree more, Bruce. We've been working with the co-op, MSH has for, I'm going to say it's closing on, it seems like 2 years. It's been a long time. Over a year ago in January, the first RFP for the VW money, which was sitting in a coffer somewhere, was given, and they asked for the moon, and of course, no one bid on it. So that first round of the RFP for the supercharger network, of which there's supposed to be a dozen around the state, didn't happen. And here we are over a year and a half later, and I am amongst a group that have been working on this a long time that are very upset with our government in the state of New Hampshire for failing to address this. The money is sitting there. The sites have been identified. There's no good reason why we have a fast charging desert in New Hampshire, except that the government of New Hampshire, I'm going to be very polite here and say they have failed us. And the money is sitting in a pool that came from the VW diesel settlement. So there's no good excuse. But you're right, thank God. I mean, for Sarah and I, we can just go across the river. I mean, the closest pizza place to me is really is in Brattleboro. So for me to go to Brattleboro for a fast charge, I'm glad I can. But for somebody in Peterborough or even Keene, that's too bad. That they have to go all the way across the state line to get to a fast charger. That's pathetic, in my opinion. Sorry.
That's what I do, and then charge at 110 at home.
It's frustrating. But the co-op has 3 designated spaces. The conduits have been laid for the control from the co-op itself. And we look forward to celebrating, hopefully next Earth Day, fast charging in Keene.
I think part of the question too was the cost. And I can't really add to that because I've never done the calculation of how much my electric bill is to, how much of that portion goes to charging my car. But I wanted to mention that I've charged my car in many charging stations that don't charge me any money.
Yeah.
That's a lot of, the word charge came in that sentence a lot. But yeah, you can charge your car for free a lot of times, they just don't charge you any money. So think of it, it's a good deal. I'm sure as we add more charging stations, they will start adding, you're going to have to pay for it, but.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. I mean, there are 2 lodging establishments that I frequent, once or more a year, and they both have free level 2 chargers that you get to use. I just used one over in Maine this week. It's wonderful. You get there, you pull in, you charge up, and then charge up again before you leave after driving around a little bit. And, it's pretty sweet. And the same thing, there's a hotel in Boston that's in the garage. And once you paid your garage fee, the charger is free for the first 4 hours in Boston. It's not free forever. But the point is, there are free chargers, which is a cool benefit. But the charging, I mean, everybody else who has, and Peter, maybe you're going to address this, paying for it on the road.
Yeah, and I don't have a good answer for that. We did pay for it down in Stanford. It was about $15 to charge for about an hour.
Yeah,
which was enough to recharge our Bolt. The other point I was going to say is, if we're fortunate enough to own our own home and be able to put in our own outlet ourselves, that's fine. But there are plenty of people that don't own their own home, maybe live in an apartment complex or even in a duplex or something where they don't have a ready outlet. If they want to go and become an EV owner, they're either going to have to go to their landlord and say, can you put in a charger for my car or anybody else's car that's part of my apartment complex? That we're going to have to start thinking that way.
Absolutely.
But otherwise, you're going to have to rely on what's available in town to charge a vehicle, that way. And there are a number of charging stations in Keene already, and they're not fast chargers, so you don't have to be willing to wait a little while or charge it just enough to get where you want to go.
Right. Well, I'm going to just step in here. We've got about a little less than 5 minutes. I'm going to ask two questions. One of the audience, if there's a topic around electric vehicles you'd like to drill down in, we've touched on a few interesting things like vehicle to vehicle and vehicle to grid, which is another very interesting subject. There's lots of others. We'd love to hear from you. Please send us a note or put it in the chat. And now I'm just going to ask each of you, if you would, if you just share a tip or any advice that you have for anyone who wants to get an EV. And then otherwise, I want to just say thank you for all of your time on this beautiful Saturday. And also to wish everyone that may the torque be with you. So Dave?
You were waiting to say that, right, John?
Let me say it again.
I just want to comment that we are doing great things here, in terms of making our environment cleaner, and it's well worth it, even if that's the only thing that it does. But obviously there are other benefits. I happen to have free supercharging for as long as I own my car. So
Nice.
just one more thing. Yeah.
Tesla doesn't give that away anymore,
No, I know.
but you can get a free 1,000 miles of supercharging if you use somebody's referral code with a
Right.
Tesla. That's better than nothing, I suppose. One thing I'd like to add with regard to Tesla, because that's the experience that I have. One of the big problems is, again, New Hampshire does not have a single Tesla service center or sales office. So the only way today you can test drive a Tesla is to go to another state. The closest one, as was mentioned earlier today, is in Dedham, Massachusetts. In addition to that, if you want to buy a Tesla, you can get it delivered, as they will do. But if you want the experience of that first drive or first experience, and you want to go to the Tesla showroom in order to pick it up, you have to do it in New York. You can't even do it in Massachusetts, because Massachusetts doesn't have temporary licenses. And they also want to take your sales tax money before you drive out of the showroom. So Massachusetts is out. The closest place to buy a Tesla and pick it up at a Tesla sales office is in Mount Kisco, New York. The good news is Tesla will, or I'm assuming they still do, as they did with me, they will reimburse you for your expenses, and they will rent you a car to drive to New York State. They will put you up overnight. They will buy you dinner. It's like a mini vacation when you go pick up your Tesla.
We're going to run out of time here. I'm going to ask you to kind of allow
Sure,
it.
that's it.
Yeah, sorry.
So,
I didn't have time for a wrap up. I'm sorry.
Just one quick item with regard to that. One of the things that your group is doing, our group is doing, is if you want to talk to somebody or possibly take a test drive with someone who has a car that you're interested in, we may be able to connect you up with someone that can do that for you. So
Thank you for
advantage,
mentioning. Yep.
please.
Yes, please. That's part. It's on the website, folks. If you do that, thank you, Dave. You're right, and I know at least one person who enjoyed a ride in your car.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to add? Tips for anyone going to buy
Sure.
an EV?
We've given test rides to probably 30 different people and willing to do it. Anyone who's looking in, we're willing to give them a free test ride.
Thank you. Same here. Peter?
Yeah, just do it. I think don't think too hard. Don't overanalyze. Just do it. Find something that you can afford. Talk to your dealer. Talk them down to a price that you can afford, and do it. You'll feel good about it in the long run.
Sarah?
I want to say exactly the same thing. Because the sooner you do it, the sooner you'll reduce your carbon footprint and the sooner you'll save money. Don't
Bruce,
forget the saving
Do
money.
you want to add anything?
They're just a joy to drive.
Yeah.
You'll never regret it. And driving up a steep hill, the torque is with you.
I'm just gonna, I hate to do this as the last word, but I love my Bolt and I always kept my cars for a long, long time, but there are so many exciting EVs coming. I watch for them and, you know, I am literally thinking about my next one and I have several people interested in buying my used Bolt when it becomes a used car. So all I can say is, in addition to saying, may the torque be with you, is go test drive one. They're just so much better technology and much more fun to drive. And on that note, I really want to thank everybody again on the panel and really Monif and everyone else and greenmonadnock.org for more information or to hook up with one of us for a test drive. And on that note, I guess we'll sign off. Thanks and enjoy the rest of this beautiful day.
Thank you.